अरे
Carolyn, am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Anita, are you there?
yes, ma'am, I'm there.
Shall we begin?
We'll start, ma'am.
Okay. Carolyn?
Okay. Welcome, dear participants. Before we begin, I request the participants to kindly mute your audio and video during the webinar and do not click on the present now or share button under any circumstances for the smooth conduct of the meeting. Clarifications or questions can be raised after the talk of the resource person. The participants are requested to type their questions in the chat box provided. Filling the feedback form at the end of the meeting ensures the eligibility for e-certificate. Prayer is a state of mind where we hand over our worries to God and He hands over His blessings to us. We now have Iron Babu to grace this occasion with a prayer song.
I come before you today, and there's just one thing that I wanna say. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord. With a grateful heart, with a song of praise, with an outstretched arm, I'll bless your name. Thank you, Lord. I just wanna thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord. I just wanna thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord.
Thank you, Iron. Every day holds the possibility of a miracle. A very warm and healthy good morning to all our participants. Our Reverend Sister Principal has always been our strength and motivation in all our activities. I now request Reverend Sister Principal to welcome the gathering.
Good morning. I really feel thrilled to welcome you all to this webinar.
When the webinar will start?
Hearty congratulations to the Department of English, Providence College. No wonder why Providence College English Department stands first in our state. You are doing wonderfully well. All the best. And I take this opportunity to welcome especially Dr. Krishna Sunder. And when I think of Manjeri and Calicut, the news of this morning flashes through in front of my eyes. Very pathetic. We are with you in prayer. All the same, we welcome you to this webinar as a resource person. And all the participants, 250 have already entered. And I know on YouTube more than 1,500 are waiting or getting entered into connection. So I welcome all of you. All the best to the Department of English. Thank you.
Thank you, Sister. I now call upon Dr. Bhuvna, Head of the Department, to share a few words.
A very good morning to all gathered here. It is with pride that I talk about my institution and my department. Providence College for Women Coonoor is an aided institution run by the Sisters of St. Joseph of Tarbes. Ever since its inception in the year 1966, the institution has been thriving to empower the women of the Nilgiris for whom higher education was but a dream. Being the first women's college on the hills, Providence College has ignited many young minds with quality education. The Department of English was started in the year 1967 and stands high as a 53-year-old strong department. Today, it is a post-graduation and research department, and thanks to the untiring efforts of all the former heads of the institution and the department. Quality in all activities and molding holistic person has always been the mission of the founders. It is with gratitude we take pride in being a member of the Providence family, extending our services in the field of education to the rural women of the hills. Today, the institution is sought for the values and knowledge imparted by dedicated and highly qualified professors. At a time when our faith is tested by the pandemic, it is the spirit and quest for knowledge that has brought us all together on a platform like this. Literature is such a wonderful subject that mirrors society, its people, culture, language, religion, tradition, so on and so forth. Not about life, not only through books, but also through the media, a powerful tool. The big screen is something that invites a lot of interest and research. It is a reflection of life. Today's topic, gender binaries and screen representations, is one that would make us look deep into the representations on screen, especially gender, a term that is biological and that which is associated with power. We, the department, are proud to record that the various clubs, the Reading Club, the meetings on all Tuesdays between 3 to 4 p.m., the Creative Club, and the Movie Club, apart from the Literary Association, is active because of the immensely talented students we have. Today, this session is organized as part of the Movie Club of the department, and it can also be considered as an inauguration of the Movie Club. Once again, on this happy note, I extend a warm welcome to our Reverend Sister Principal, all the participants from the various states of the country, participants from abroad, and my dear staff and students of the department here this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. I now request Dr. Anita to introduce our guest speaker for today's event.
Good morning, all. I'm very pleased to introduce our speaker, Ms. Krishna Sunder. Ms. Krishna graduated from Providence Women's College, Calicut. Ma'am has a professional experience of teaching at Providence College, Calicut, AWH Engineering College, and at present, she is at KAHM Unity Women's College, Manjeri. She has a wide organizational experience like ASAP trainer, Secretary of English Association, language trainer, coordinator of college newsletter, and has participated in programs to plan new methods of teaching. Ms. Krishna has a well-developed academic credentials by publishing articles and attending numerous academic seminars and giving lectures. At this juncture, I should throw light on some of her achievements, which are considered as highlights that has made us approach her for this session. Ms. Krishna has wide interest in filmography and film theory. Madam has the experience of meeting the famous feminist film theorist Laura Mulvey at London. She has also visited the exhibition on film theory at the University of London. To add on to her academic tour, Ms. Krishna has visited Sigmund Freud's Museum, Shakespeare's Globe Theatre, and Stratford-upon-Avon, and her research articles stand as a proof for her expertise in the area of film theory. She has widely researched and published impressive articles on the film exponent Christopher Nolan. Added to this, Ms. Krishna has a number of creative publications starting from short stories, travelogues, poems, and to innumerous memoirs and essays. Today, we are very fortunate to have such a talent amidst us and to deliver this lecture on gender binaries and screen representations. Welcome, ma'am. Thank you.
So
Thank you,
good
ma'am.
morning to one and all.
Thank you, ma'am. I now request Ms. Krishna Sunder to take over the session and leave us with new perspectives and insights this morning.
So thank you very much. First of all, am I visible and audible? Can I get a few responses, please?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, you are.
Okay, fine. Thank you. I'm getting a lot of response. Thank you very much. So a very warm good morning to one and all. First of all, I would like to thank a Reverend Sister, the principal of the college. I would also like to thank Anita ma'am for giving such an extensive introduction. I would also like to thank Dr. Buena, head of the Department of English, and the entire team at Department of English, Providence College for Women, Coonoor, for inviting me to this platform and giving me an opportunity to share a few of my ideas related to the topic. So the topic for discussion today is gender binaries and screen representations. So just tell me whether the screen is visible for you. Okay, so can I get a few responses, please? Is the screen visible?
Yes, it is visible.
Okay, thank you very much. So is the screen visible or should I go to the Zoom mode of the screen? Now, once I move into this Zoom mode, I won't be able to see the chat messages anymore. So please do bear with me in case of any technological error. And please do inform me through WhatsApp in case if something goes wrong, because I cannot read the messages anymore once I get into the full mode.
Yes, Krishna, I will do that.
Okay.
You can carry on. Thank you.
So here is a topic for discussion today, gender binaries and screen representations. So before we start, I would like to give you an outline regarding the areas that we would be touching upon today. As we all know, film studies is a very extensive area, so as feminism. So touching upon all the relevant aspects related to both feminism and film studies would really be impossible, and it would be beyond the scope of my presentation. So what we would be touching upon today would be how film studies originated as a discipline and how feminist film theory evolved through the ages. And we would also be looking at a few film examples from different movie industries in order to see how women have been represented in movies across the years. So let's begin. So I would like to take you towards 4 different movie images. I'm sure most of the images you might be able to recognize it very quickly. Now let's come to the very first image, which is a black and white image. I would like to quote a very popular dialogue from this 1974 Hollywood movie. Now, the popular dialogue goes like this: I approve your uniform, tight in all the right places, not too many buttons. So that means it's very easy for the hero to unbutton the costume of the heroine. Now, this is a dialogue which is said by the hero to his colleagues. Now, this is actually a 1974 Hollywood movie. This actually belongs to the James Bond series, and you can see Roger Moore in the main heroic role, acting out the James Bond role. So this was a very popular movie. The title of the movie is The Man with the Golden Gun, one of the James Bond movie series. Now, if you look at this, you can see this became a very popular dialogue during the 1970s in America. This is the situation in 1974. From 1974, I would like to take you towards 1995, towards a Bollywood movie. You can see the picture here with Kajol and Farida Jalal. I'm sure you would be able to recognize this movie because this is considered as one of the greatest romances in the history of Bollywood industry. So this is DDLJ, which was released in the year 1995. Dilwale Dulhania Le Jayenge, which is still loved by generations of people. Now, this is actually a conversation which happens between the mother and the daughter. Now, Kajol, who plays the role of Simran, the heroine in the movie. Now, this is what Farida Jalal tells. She says, you can dream, but don't be stubborn about making your dreams come true. To cut it short, the mother is advising her daughter not to be very ambitious about her future. Now, this is a situation in 1995. Now, let us move one decade ahead. Now, let me take you to Kal Ho Na Ho, which was released in the year 2003, another blockbuster film in which Shah Rukh Khan takes the lead role. Now, if you look at the image, I'm sure if you have watched the movie, you can recognize this dialogue, Che Din Ladki In. Within 6 days, you can actually trap a girl. Now, this is a dialogue that Shah Rukh Khan tells Saif Ali Khan. Now, this actually came like a slogan in the year 2003 and was used in almost all the campuses in a very prominent way. It was just like a cliche, just like a slogan which was used by every person during that period. Now, that was the situation in 2003. Now, let us come to the very recent scenario, that is 2019. If you look at the image here, you can recognize that this is a scene from the movie Kabir Singh. This is actually a remake of the Telugu movie Arjun Reddy. Now, you can see Shahid Kapoor here. You can see the heroine here. Now, this is a scene in which the hero slaps his girlfriend. Now, despite the thrashing that happens, the story ends when both of them get united. So despite the slapping that goes at one point of time, the heroine is very happy in getting married to this guy. So this is a situation in 2019. So from 1974 till 2019 to the current scenario, one thing which we have to understand is that the way in which women are represented on screen has got a systematic pattern. It has got a systematic framework. Now, many theories have come up. Feminism has actually gone a very long way. But despite all these factors, there is a particular systematic framework through which women are represented. Now, as we all know, movies have got a huge influence on the society, and the society too can in turn influence the release of the movie. So it's a mutual kind of connection. So we understand that right from 1974 till 2019, around 40 to 50 years. And when we analyze this, we can clearly comprehend that this systematic framework has not changed at all. So in order to understand its relevance, let's have a look at how movies and society become related to one another. Movies are a reflection of the society that we live in. Now, movies are actually considered as a cultural artifact, which means they have an ideology which remains in them, which is embedded to them because of the society in which it is placed. In the same way, the society also controls the kind of movies in a different way. So it is in fact a mutually complementing kind of relationship. Movies are an insignia of change. If you look at the history of movies, there have been a lot of movies which have become very revolutionary, which could even change the legal systems, which might have changed the perspectives of certain societies. So movies actually have a very powerful role in creating a perspective within the society. They have the power to construct as well as to deconstruct the existing social norms. But despite all these conditions, what we see through movies now is that women have always been stereotyped. As mentioned in the previous slide, there is a particular systematic framework through which women are always represented on screen. And there is no difference with it, whether it be in a Hollywood movie or a Bollywood movie or any kind of regional movie industry. The pattern that is followed remains the very same. So in a way, it is a universal phenomena by which you can see the way in which women are actually represented. Now, to understand the extent of this representation, let's have a look at the history of women representations in movies. Women always have had one-dimensional roles. But when you look at the male characters in most of the movies, we can see that there are multiple dimensions added to the male characters. But when it comes to the female characters, it is always one-dimensional. So let's go to the very first female actress in the history of film industry. And it was in the year 1906 that a woman appears in the movie as a heroine of the movie. And this movie was titled as Danielle Boone. So the first female actress was Florence Lawrence. Now, she is a Canadian actress, and she was the very first actress to come as a heroine in a Hollywood movie. Now, this was during the silent era period of the film industry. And to look at this movie in one single glance, Danielle Boone is a story of a father and a daughter. Now, as the story progresses, the daughter gets kidnapped, and the father has to go through a lot of hurdles and struggles. And at the end of the movie, the father rescues his daughter, and he comes back home with the daughter. Now, this is a story of Danielle Boone. Now, if you look at the story, there is an underlying politics within the storyline, because the man becomes the savior here. He saves the life of the daughter. Now, there is no difference, like whether it could be a father, a husband, a son, whoever it is, man is always given the role of a savior in movies. Now, you can see this is what happened in the year 1906. Now, we are standing in 2020, almost more than 1 century ahead. But even today, if you look at the movie patterns, it is a very same pattern that is reiterated. So it is a recurring pattern or a recurring motive, as you can see. So getting on to another discussion related with the emergence of film studies, till the year 1960, films were not considered actually as a discipline. It was during the 1960s that films started getting a different perspective. It was during the 1960s that a number of movies were actually released. Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, Tom Ford's Searchers, these movies actually got released during the 1960s. Now, in American culture, suddenly there was a kind of a baby boom which created a cinephilia among the common people. People started watching movies, not just watching movies, people even started analyzing the process, concepts, functions, and meaning of films which have been released. So the release of these movies, Searchers and Psycho, created a lot of interest in the common people at that time. And people started analyzing these movies by connecting it with different theories. And slowly, gradually, a number of departments actually emerged in America in a number of places. Now, slowly this began. It started getting spread into the Western countries, the European countries. And this is how film studies gradually becomes an intellectual pursuit or as a separate discipline. So films actually, they got to be considered as an intellectual pursuit only from 1960s onwards. So it was from 1960s onwards that film studies becomes a discipline. And it was by 1970s that feminism gets connected with film theory. So feminism combines with film theory, and that was the very first foundational discussion which went on connecting women representations with films. So let's have a brief look at feminist film theory. Feminist film theory evolved during the second wave of feminism. We all know that feminism had different waves. So it began with the second wave feminism. And this was a period when a number of very popular books actually got released into the society, a number of inspiring books, books which came in a different platform. This included Simone Bo's Second Sex, again Betty Friedan's The Feminine Mystic, Sexual Politics by Kate Millett. These books really created or remained as a trendsetter, as a watershed book during this period. So feminist politics got combined with film theory, and thus came out what we call as feminist film theory today. It was actually originated in America, and it started with the first work which came out in the year 1973, which was written by Manjeri. The title of her work is Popcorn Venus, Women, Movies, and the American Dream. Now, when this book was released in the year 1973, it created a lot of controversies and discussions, because that was the first time in which women's roles were recognized in movies, or at least there were some people analyzing the roles of women in movies. So Manjeri Rosen's 1973 work is considered as the very first book which chronicles the representation of women in movies. Again, it was in the very next year, in 1974, that Molly Haskell comes up with her work, From Reverence to Rape, the treatment of women in movies. So this was the second book which again gave a complete explanation regarding how women were completely marginalized on screen or in movies. And it was in the year 1975 that Laura Mulvey, the British feminist, who came with the essay Visual Pleasure and Narrative Cinema. Now, this was released in the British journal Screen for the very first time in the year 1975. And this was, in fact, a conceptual leap in the field of feminism and film theory. Now, when this essay was released, it created a lot of controversies, discussions, and debates. And when this essay got released, Manjeri Rosen's work and Molly Haskell's work, they actually had to be placed in the backseat. Now, this became a very popular essay, and people started analyzing and discussing women representations completely on a different plane. And to some extent, this was actually a very shocking kind of essay for the societies all over the world. So let's take a brief look at Mulvey's essay, and it relates with what we call as gaze theory today. Now, initially, when she begins, Mulvey says that a film world is definitely a phallocentric world. Now, a phallocentric world is definitely a world which is dominated by men. So this is how she begins her essay. And she said that women occupy only passive roles in films, whereas men always had active roles, which means men make the meaning of the movie, whereas women are just bearers of that meaning. So one is a maker and the other one is a bearer of the meaning. She also adds that there is a lot of difference in the way in which a male actor and a female actor is perceived by the spectator. And this is the first of its kind which came as a theory which talked about the distinction between being a male actor and a female actor. She has connected her essay by linking it with Freud's psychoanalysis and Lacan's mirror stage. So this is actually a combination of a lot of theories which are coming together. She made use of psychoanalysis as a political weapon in this essay. And she says that a female actress is actually used to represent visual pleasure in the movie. And she uses the term scopophilia. Now, scopophilia, again, is a term coined by Freud, where one derives pleasure by looking at somebody else. So this is exactly the same kind of technology that is employed in movies, which is related with visual pleasure. And she says that when visual pleasure is something that we connect with the female actor in the movie, with male actor, it is always an identification that comes from the part of the spectator. So see, there is a lot of difference. When a woman is considered just as a tool for visual pleasure, the very same spectator easily identifies with the male actor. And this was the difference that she stated through this essay. And she says that there are three looks which can easily fall on a woman character in the movie. And she says that the first is the camera lens that falls on this lady. The second one is the eyes or the perception by the male actors who are working within her in the very same movie. Now, the third one is actually the vision by the male spectators, which again will fall on the very same character. So in three ways, a woman is seen. First through the camera lens, then through the male actors, and then by the male spectators. Now, she concludes her essay by saying that we need a different kind of movie structure. We have to break this present structure, which is completely embedded with almost all film industries. Now, one thing that she suggests here is that when a male spectator identifies with the male hero, he feels that he himself and the male hero, they are one and the same. And once when he gets that identical feeling, the male spectator can easily take hold of the female heroine in the movie by means which we can understand that the female heroine becomes a property in the hands of the male spectators too, because he makes use of scopophilia by enjoying it through the visual pleasure exhibited by the women characters. Now, this is a crux of Mulvey's essay. Now, Mulvey's essay was released around 40-45 years back. It was released in the year 1975. And from Mulvey's essay today, feminist film theory had actually traveled very far. There are lots of other theories which came up after Mulvey's essay. But even today, Mulvey's essay stands relevant. The major reason here is that it stands relevant because the structure that Mulvey wanted to break 40-45 years back, that structure is still predominantly ruling all the screens. And that is why we say Mulvey's essay still remains as a foundational essay in this field. So since then, as we know, film theory has come with feminism a long way. Now, Mulvey was actually talking about binaries in her essay, how a male actor and how a female actress is represented. But from these gender binaries, today, feminist film theory had traveled towards multiple perspectives, hybrid identities, queer studies, sexuality, nation, politics, culture, history, and a lot of things. But despite the explosion of all these theories, Mulvey's essay still remains as one of the foundational essays in order to understand and analyze women representation in movies. So now comes a real point. How are women actually represented in movies? Now, they are represented in three different ways. The very first category is the subjugated role of women. Now, 80% of films in and around the world are actually done through this method, subjugated role or marginalized role for women. The second way in which a woman is portrayed is definitely as a sexually objectified woman, someone who is objectified through the screen. Now, the third category is actually as a spider woman. Now, this is somewhat different from the other two categories. You will understand it in a better way when we go through the next slides. So moving on to the first category, subjugated roles. Now, the term itself will give you a clear-cut definition. Now, by subjugated roles, it means either marginalized role or having less screen time. Now, sometimes some women characters in movies will be having a very prominent and important role. But in such cases, the screen time allotted to them would be very less because they either get killed or they move out of the storyline. So the prominence would be high, but the screen time allotted would be very less. There is another possibility in which the screen time is very high, but their roles will not be very prominent. The best example would be The first image that you can see, I'm sure you can recognize the movie. This is a Malayalam movie which was released in 2015. I'm sure you know the title of the movie. It is Drishyam, in which Mohanlal comes in the lead role and Meena plays the role of Rani as a wife of George Woody. Now, if you look at this movie, Rani is totally a marginalized character. She is totally a subjugated character because whatever happens in the plot comes from the brain of George Gutti, the male character. It is George Gutti who decides things at home. It is the main character who plans everything. He manipulates, he tackles, he advises. Everything is done by George Gutti. So it is the duty of the wife just to listen to him and nothing more than that. So coming to the second point, there is less participation from these subjugated women characters, and they have got no role in decision making. So they are not actually a major part of the plot. They remain as a shadow of the male character. So Rani in Drishyam is the best example of a subjugated woman character. Now I'm sure that all of you might have seen this. Maybe if not Drishyam, the very same movie was remade into Pabanasham, in which Kamal Haasan plays the lead role. This was again remade into a Hindi movie in which Ajay Devgan plays the lead role. So these kind of characters are actually subjugated characters. They don't have a greater say or a greater role within the movie structure. Now, I would like to take you to another interesting image here, image number 2. Can you recognize the movie? This is a very recent movie, a Bollywood movie, which was released in the year 2019, and the movie is Mission Mangal. You can see Vidya Balan doing the rituals and prayer here. Those who have seen the movie might know the story structure. Now, this is a movie in which Vidya Balan plays the role of Tara. Now, Tara is the project manager at ISRO. I'm repeating the name, ISRO, Indian Space Research Center. So she is actually in a very reputed position in ISRO. And the most interesting part of the movie is that the very same day when the satellite is going to be launched. Now see, the day when the satellite is going to be launched, the whole India is waiting for that because this is a dream come true for all Indians. So it is such a big day. And on that very specific day, we can see Tara, who is busily working in her kitchen during the early morning on the very same day when the satellite is going to be launched, and she being a project designer at ISRO. And she gets into the kitchen, she makes the breakfast, she helps her daughter in taking the toothbrush and the paste, she wakes up her son, and there is a husband of Vidya Balan, that is the character Tara. The husband is played by Sanjay Kapoor, who comes in the role of Sunil. Now, her husband is relaxing on a couch and asking for a tea to his wife, and she is making tea on the other side, and there is a father-in-law at the house, and she gives medicines to this father-in-law. She conducts this diya, puja, everything. Then she goes, she takes a shower, then she dresses up, and then she runs to ISRO. Now, there is a very clear politics which is working behind this movie. It clearly states that even if you are in a very reputed position, just like a project manager at ISRO, even then, your responsibilities as a mother, as a wife, as a daughter-in-law will never cease. So that is a part of your life. Now, that responsibility will not be taken up by the men in the homes. That is your responsibility, which you have to shoulder. This is a clear kind of a politics that works within this movie. So if you look at the subjugated roles, you can see that there is no empowerment coming here. There is no independence given for the character here. Now, coming to the third image, I'm sure you can recognize the movie. This is the Telugu movie, Arjun Reddy. Now, Arjun Reddy was a very popular movie at the time when it was released. And that is the reason why it got into a remake into a number of other languages. Now, this is the same scene that we had already discussed with Kabir Singh, in which Shahid Kapoor was thrashing the girlfriend. The same thing happens here. You can see the hero says, if you speak politically now, I will smash your face. And then he continues, if you continue talking, I will dislocate your bones. This is a dialogue that he says. And finally, he slaps her. Now, even after this thrashing happens, even after the slap, finally, we understand that the heroine gets married to the very same person. Now, at least considering that part, the recent movie Thappad was much far ahead than this movie, I would say, because at least the lady was ready to walk out of that person who thrashed her. So in Arjun Reddy, again, you can see how a girl has to endure all these kind of humiliations from a man. So an ideal wife, a woman always should be an ideal wife. A woman always should be an ideal mother and an ideal girlfriend. Now, this is the image which is released when we talk about these kind of subjugated women characters. Now, it is said men act and women appeal. Men look at women and women watch themselves being looked at. Now, this is exactly what is happening in all movies. Now, there is no exception for this. Right from 1906, from Daniel Boone onwards, this is the same pattern, the same structure, which is working with all movie industries. So let's move on to the next part. How women are sexually objectified in movies. Now, when a woman is objectified through her body, that is what you call as sexual objectification. And the sexual objectification actually works as a tool creating visual pleasure for the spectators. Now, this is exactly what Mulvey pointed out in her essay. To make it a bit more clear, I would like to take you to the first image here. The first image is taken from an old Malayalam movie, Spadigam, in which you can see Mohanlal is playing the lead role, and you can see Silk Smitha, who is doing the character role, Layla. I'm sure most of you might be recognizing Mohanlal's character name, Adudoma. So there is Adudoma and Layla here. And if you look at the role of Silk Smitha in this movie, her role is completely an extraneous element, which means even if you push her character role outwardly, the plot of Spadigam would still work. The story will still proceed because she is not an important character, but she was placed in between only to provide visual pleasure for the spectators. And there is a very famous song in the movie, Elimala Pujona. So apart from this movie sequence and a few scenes with Mohanlal, there is no particular role for this character. And the most amusing part is that these kind of sexually objectified women, they never become materials for marriage. When we talk about marriage as an institution, these women are never brought into the institution of marriage. If you look at Spadigam, you can see that Mohanlal has a very close connection with this character, Layla. But when it comes to marriage, Mohanlal chooses Urvashi, who is in the role of Tulasi, because she is a very conventional lady, clad in sari, not highly progressive, very conventional. So she becomes a material for marriage. But the sexually objectified woman never becomes a material for marriage. So again, through movies, a contrast is initiated, how a lady should be and how a lady should not be. A man for marriage always prefers the conventional kind of lady who is not very progressive or who is not very independent. Now let us take a look at the second image from Pulimurugan, another Mohanlal movie. You can see the other female character here, Namita. Now, Namita's role is exactly like the role of Silk Smitha in Spadigam, because there is no role for her actually apart from sexually being objectified. Now, if you look at Mohanlal's character, you can see that he has a wife at his home. And that wife, again, is a lady who is wearing a sari, who is very conventional, who is not very progressive. So Namita here never becomes the material for marriage. Now, this is what happens in most of the sexually objectified women characters within the movies. If you look at a number of Bollywood movies, you can see a lot of item songs are there in which certain women characters appear in Bollywood movies only for item songs. They won't be a part of the characters depicted in the story. They just come for the item song and they just vanish. So in all these cases, we can see that man becomes the subject and woman becomes just the object, which is being objectified. So now let's move into the next category. The third category is woman as a spider woman, and this is otherwise known as femme fatale. Now, this is actually a stereotype which comes in all movies. This began even in ancient literature. This is actually a French term. Femme fatale is a French term which means the fatal woman or she is otherwise known as a spider woman. So right from the term, you can understand that she brings in a very scary image even for the man. So if you look at the characteristics, she is very different from the other two categories. She is not a subjugated woman. Sometimes she becomes a sexually objectified woman and sometimes not. But she is a very independent character. And these kind of characters actually originated through a special genre of movies named as noir movies. Now, noir movies were actually dark kind of movies which created a very negative ambience. There were a lot of killings, a lot of negative things happening within the movie. And these kind of movies became very popular in American culture during the 1940s. And it was during this period that the femme fatales were incorporated into all kinds of noir movies. So they actually became a particular stereotype by which women representation happened. Now, if you look at her characteristics, you can see that she is very powerful, very independent, and very, very different from the subjugated woman. In most of the movies with femme fatales, you can see that these femme fatales, they drink, they smoke. Now, smoking and drinking, these are usually considered as masculine traits. But in order to show that these women possess a very independent nature, they usually drink and smoke. Now, if you look at the pictures here, you can see most of the ladies, they have a cigarette in their hands, and some of them are having a glass of alcohol or wine in their hands. So this is one feature, one characteristic feature you can see with these kind of spider women. And another important thing is that they make use of their sexuality. And using their sexuality, they will try to entrap the men. Now, moreover, these kind of spider women will never be inside a marriage. These spider women will always be the other woman who is outside the institution of marriage. Now, see, when we talk about independence, definitely she has to stand outside the marriage in one way or the other way. So she stands outside the institution of marriage. She doesn't believe in the institution of marriage. She doesn't believe in the glorification of motherhood. But she has a power by which she can trap any man. And that is why she is known as a spider woman. She is, in fact, a threat for masculinity. She becomes a threat for masculinity because she at times becomes more powerful than a man. She is very independent. She stands for her integrity and she can go to any extent to fulfill her needs. And because of this, she really becomes a threat for the masculine power. Now, if you look at the character graph of these women spiders in movies, you can see that in all movies, they get killed finally. If you look at the first picture, the black and white image, this is a scene from an old American movie, Double Indemnity, in which the character Phyllis is sitting there with a cigarette in her hands. She is a femme fatale, and just because she is very powerful and independent, she gets killed at the end of the story. Coming to the next image, this is Cersei from the very popular series Game of Thrones. If you look at Cersei, Cersei can go to any extent to fulfill her needs. She uses her sexuality as a powerful tool to make her wishes come true. So definitely, she too gets killed at the end of the story. Let me take you to another Bollywood movie, Zehar, in which you can see Aditi Goswami, who plays the role of Enna, and there is Imran Hashmi. If you look at the storyline, Enna, played by Aditi Goswami, is the other woman. She is not Hashmi, is already married to a lady named Sonia, the role played by Shamita Shetty. Now, Enna comes as the other woman and traps the hero, Imran Hashmi. But finally, things are sorted out. Aditi Goswami, who plays the role of Enna, gets killed, and Imran Hashmi joins with his conventional wife, Shamita Shetty. The same kind of storyline happens even with the Bollywood movie Etraz, in which Akshay Kumar is married to Kareena Kapoor, but Priyanka Chopra comes as the other lady. She uses her sexuality as a tool, but finally things are sorted out. Akshay Kumar joins with his wife Kareena Kapoor, and finally she dies. The very recent Netflix series, which is titled as Dark, which is a German series, you can see there is a character named Hannah. Now, she again is a very independent character. Again, she uses her sexuality as a tool. Definitely at the end of season 4, she is killed. So if you look at these femme fatales, they are very powerful characters, very independent characters, totally a contrast to subjugated women characters. But the disappointing fact is that since they are very powerful, since they are very independent, and since they become a threat for masculinity, they get killed at the end of the story. So this is how women representations work. Now, till now we were discussing how women are marginalized in movies. In order to understand the extent of this marginalization, I feel that we should definitely have a look at how men are portrayed in films. So let's have a look at the portrayal of men. Now, definitely, hypermasculinity is one term which we can associate with male depictions in movies. This term hypermasculinity was first used by Donald Mosher and Mark Serkin in the year 1984. Now, hypermasculinity means an exaggeration of male qualities or masculine qualities, which is actually very different from realistic descriptions. So this is an exaggerated, a hyperbolic kind of masculinity which is portrayed through movies. So in a way, this hypermasculinity is equal to the manifestation of domination, which means a man can appear as dominating. And definitely this domination is something which relates with women. They can dominate women because dominating women is not seen as a crime, or in a way it is justified when it comes under the term hypermasculinity. And it again shows the macho man, the physically strong man, who again comes in the role of the savior. Now, we discussed Daniel Boone in 1906, where the father gets into the role of becoming the savior. Now, the very same pattern is used in films even today. There is no difference with the kind of framework that has been used. Now, if you look at a number of recent movies, we can see that there is one single trope which works in all movie patterns. The lady is always in danger, and it is a man who comes and rescues her. Now, let's have a look at the first image here. You can see this is an image from the movie Batman. Batman Begins. There is Dark Knight also, and here you can see Batman is actually carrying the character Rachel Dawes. Now, Rachel Dawes is actually a character who is an attorney general in the movie. But despite being an attorney general, it is a man who finally rescues her, finally saving her. Let us get into the second picture, the image number 2. You can see Spider-Man saving the lady again. This is the bridge scene from Spider-Man Homecoming. Let me take you to another interesting picture, image number 3. In image number 3, you can see this is a scene from the very popular movie series, which is a remake of the books written by Stephanie Meyer. This is Twilight series. You can see Robert Pattinson, who's doing the role of Edward Cullen. There is Kristen Stewart, who's doing the role of Bella Swan. Now, you can see the girl here is going to be knocked down by a car. Suddenly, the hero appears. He thrashes the car. You can see the huge dent that is caused by him. So you can see the extent of his strength. So he thrashes the car and he rescues the heroine. Now, as the story progresses, the heroine falls in love with this man. Now, if you look at this, at least there is some kind of a justification with Twilight series, because the hero in Twilight is a vampire. He is not a normal human being. So maybe because of that, he might be possessing a lot of different capabilities, which might be very different from a normal human being. So this kind of an image where the lady is always in danger, the man coming as a savior, is a repeated kind of image that you can see in all movies. Let's take another example, a very recent movie, Malayalam movie, which was released very recently, titled as Capella. Now, in this movie, there is Enna Ben, who actually plays the role of Jessie. Now, she gets into a very dangerous situation, and it is another character whose name is Joy, which is played by Srinath Basi, who rescues her. So the very same pattern is utilized. Again, if you look at the image number 4, you can see the scene is from Titanic, the very famous movie by James Cameron. You can see Kate Winslet, who plays the role of Rose. She is about to commit suicide, but it is Leonardo DiCaprio who comes in the role of Jack, who is actually diverting her and bringing her back to life. So in a way, hypermasculinity need not always be physical strength. That is how hypermasculinity is read in today's world. It need not always be physical strength. Sometimes it can relate with the intellectual strength of a man. Sometimes even intellectual kind of manipulation is also associated with this kind of a masculine quality. If you read it in this way, even George Kuti in Drishyam is hypermasculine in a different way, not by his physical strength, but he has no particular school education, but still he is able to manipulate and create a fabricated kind of story even by overcoming the police people. So that is an intellectual kind of manipulation. So man coming in the role as a savior is a reiterated kind of trope that is working in all the movies. So with hypermasculinity, aggression and physical strength, these are the two qualities which are justified in connection with hypermasculinity. Now, no offense meant to all the men who are listening to this talk, because we are just discussing and talking about a systematic kind of conceptualization which is happening within the framework of movies, not in real life descriptions. So this actually justifies aggression and physical strength. Violence is also justified because in order to be hyper-masculine, you have to be violent. That is how the theory goes on. So when there's aggression, physical strength, violence, when all these qualities can be connected with hyper-masculinity, in a way, it actually becomes toxic masculinity for the entire society. And this kind of hyper-masculinity is usually seen in superhero characters. It is seen in all male characters, but more often than not, it is seen in superhero characters. And along with that, stalking and molesting is also justified when it comes with male characters. I would like to take you to picture number 5, image number 5, where you can see Shah Rukh Khan and Juhi Chawla. Now, this is a Yash Chopra movie which was released in the year 1993, which is titled as Dar. In this movie, Shah Rukh Khan is actually taking up the role of a psychopath who is stalking his girlfriend. And during the year 1993, everyone had one single song on their lips. And it's a very popular song, Jadoo Teri Nazar, Kushboo Tera Badan. Now, the next two lines are more important. Tu ha kar ya na kar, tu hai meri kiran. So if you translate these two lines, it comes like, whether you agree or not, you are my Kiran. So in a way, if you interpret these lines, the consent of the lady is immaterial here. Nobody is looking into the matter whether the girl agrees or not. So it goes in such a way, tu ha kar ya na kar. Whether you say yes or whether you say no, it doesn't really matter to me because you are my property. Tu hai meri Kiran. This is how the lines go. So again, this represents a kind of politics which is working in between, which talks again about male domination. Again, as the story progresses, you can see that at the end of the story, it is again Juhi Chawla's husband, which is played by Sunny Deol, who comes and rescues her finally. So again, man in the same role of being the savior. I would also like to take your attention towards image 6, which is again a recent movie, a very popular, famous movie, Bahubali. Now, in Bahubali, first part, you can see Bahubali, which is played by Prabhas, and there is another character named Avantika, which is played by Tamanna. If you look at the story, this kind of a stalking happens even with the same character. Now, Bahubali stalks this Avantika because Avantika is a warrior girl. She wears a warrior dress. She is very masculine in the way she carries herself because she is a fighter. Now, Bahubali stalks her. He draws a tattoo on her body. And finally, it goes into such a situation that where the male character is actually molesting the female character. In a way, you can easily call that as a rape attempt made by the hero. But this rape attempt is never creating an outcry or a rebellion because in one way or the other way, the female heroine is happy with that. She never complains. She easily falls for that. And just because she falls for that easily, it never becomes as a crime. But it was a rape if you look at it from a different perspective. Now, apart from that, another important thing here is that Bahubali was never happy to see her in her warrior costume. He cuts off her warrior costume and she drapes her with another red kind of dress, which makes her completely feminine. And he draws kajal in her eyes. He draws lipstick on her lips. So he makes her completely feminine, and he doesn't want her to be at least a little bit equal to what we call as masculinity, because fighting is something meant for men. So again, this is again giving you another kind of intimation to the society that this is how a woman has to be. So these are the kind of representations that we have even in today's world. So let's have a look at some of the other hypermasculine characters, some of the great superheroes who are ruling the world now. Image one, you can see Iron Man, and then there is Superman, there is Captain America, there is Batman, Hulk, Spider-Man, and there are innumerable characters who are coming as superheroes. There is Ant-Man, there is Wolverine, again there is a Ninja Turtle. So there are lots and lots of characters where you can see this hyper-masculine roles or Superman kind of characters. So to look at some of the superhero characters in Indian scenario, you might have heard about the movie Krish, in which Hrithik Roshan plays the role of Krish. You can see image number one. Image number two, Bahubali, which we have already discussed. Again, image number three, where Rajinikanth comes in the form of an artificially intelligent robot. Now, even an artificially intelligent robot is hyper-masculine because it has got certain capabilities and powers which is not embedded or entrusted with a normal human being. Now, with a number of superhero characters emerging, a number of feminists argued that why not think about a superwoman character? And it was in the later decades that a number of superwoman characters emerged. I'm sure you might be familiar with the image number 4, which is an image from Wonder Woman, where Gal Gadot plays the main role. Now, when feminists wanted superhero women characters, a number of women superheroes emerged. But the funny part here was that these super women characters were again objectified in a different way. If you look at the costume of Gal Gadot in Wonder Woman, and if you look at the costumes of a number of other female superheroines, you can see that they are completely objectified. So when hypermasculinity has to be correlated, it is actually getting correlated with what we call as hypersexual roles. So it is not something connected with any kind of independence or empowerment. Rather, sexual objectification comes in a different form here once again. So moreover, when we look at a different categorical form of movies released. Now, there are a number of movies in which mission accomplishment takes place. I'm sure that there are a number of movies where teamwork becomes very important because one has to take the lead. And whenever this kind of teamwork or mission accomplishment comes in movies, the lead always goes to the man. To cite a few examples, the first image would take you back to the movie Chak De, in which Shah Rukh Khan is the coach guiding a team of hockey players. So the lead role is given for a man. Let's get back to 2020 with the popular Netflix series Money Heist. Now, in Money Heist, you can see there are a number of female characters too, along with male characters. This is actually a series which is about a high-scale looting. Now, even though there are a number of female characters here, the main lead role once again goes to a man. And that man is known as the professor within the series, and that role is played by the Spanish actor Alvaro Morte. Again, coming to another movie in image number 3, Inception. This is a movie which is a very complex kind of movie where a mind infiltration or psychological infiltration happens, and this works as a teamwork. Now, there is a very capable lady working in this team, but again, if you look at the team as a whole, the main lead is done by the hero, and that hero is none other than Leonardo DiCaprio. So he plays the role of a cop in this movie. Let me take you to another popular blockbuster movie, Ocean's 11, another Hollywood movie. Now, if you look at this movie, this is again a movie which is related with looting. And Julia Roberts plays a very important role in the movie. Julia Roberts is a very popular actress, but despite the fact that she is a popular actress and she is a very fine actress, the lead role is taken up by George Clooney in this movie. Let's forget about Hollywood movies. Let's come back to Bollywood movies. Let me take you to Mission Mangal, which was released in the year 2019. Now, this is a movie which is very different from all the other movies because this was a movie which had a very strong female star cast. There is Vidya Balan, there is Tapsi Pannu, there is Sonakshi Sinha, there is Nithya Menon, there is Kirti Kulhari. So around 5 or 6 strong female characters are there working together for the mission launching. But despite all said and done, the lead here is taken by Akshay Kumar. Let us get back to Lagan. Again, the lead role is taken by Amir Khan. Now, there are multiple number of movies which can be connected with this. For example, Mission Impossible, in which Tom Cruise plays the role of Ethan. There is another Malayalam movie in which Prithviraj comes in the lead role. That is again a movie about looting, Saptamashri Taskaran, which was released a couple of years back. So lots of movies which come into this very same category. Now, maybe at least some of you might be having some kind of disagreements where you might have noticed certain movies with female leads. Definitely, I do agree with that part. But when you look at the movie industry as a bigger picture, the majority of the movies are going in the very same structural pattern where women are completely marginalized. So, what could be the necessary change? Or what change do we need actually in this year, in 2020, to make things come into a better shape? Now, we all know that films form an unconscious landscape of a social life. We had already discussed that because there is a mutual connection that happens between films and society. And they have a power to create and break the structures in a society. And moreover, the director has got an impeccable influence within the society. So a director is actually a social reformer. He has the power to reform the society in different ways. If you look at the history of films, there have been a lot number of movies which has in fact revolutionized a number of concepts. There have been movies which has created a difference in the perspectives of people in a society. Now, one best example would be a documentary which was released in Pakistan in the year 2015. The title of the documentary is A Girl in the River. Now, this is a movie about honor killings. Now, in this movie, a girl falls, this is not a movie, this is a documentary actually. In this documentary, the girl falls in love with a man who's from a different community. So automatically there is a lot of trouble coming in. Her father is attempting to kill her. Her father is about to murder her and the girl has a narrow escape. Now, this is the crux of this documentary. Now, when this documentary was released in 2015 in Pakistan, it created a lot of controversies, debates, and discussions. The documentary was even watched by a number of government officials that finally the legal system in Pakistan was revised just because of this documentary. So see, there have been films which could even change societies. If you look at another film which was released in 1993 in America, the title of the movie is Philadelphia, in which Tom Hanks plays the major role. Now, in 1993, this was a very controversial movie because this was a movie which talked about the situation of a person who has contracted AIDS. And this person, to make it more dangerous, is a homosexual too. So AIDS and homosexuality, these were two things which were not accepted by the society in the year 1993. So people who were suffering from AIDS were considered as outsiders in the society. People never talked to them. People never mixed with them. So they were completely living as outcasts within their own communities. When this movie was released in the year 1993, it created a lot of change. A lot of change, at least with the fact that at least people's perspectives could be changed. People started analyzing or seeing these people from a different perspective. And this movie was actually able to destabilize the stigma associated with AIDS and homosexuality. The movie even talks about homophobia. So there have been a number of movies which could really bring changes to the society, and that is the kind of change that we require in a society. And another dangerous thing with this kind of a structural pattern coming in movies is that When this continuous strain of marginalized women are portrayed in movies, even women start internalizing patriarchy. I would like to take you to another example to state this. If you look at Twilight series, which was written by a female writer, Stephanie Meyer, the story goes in such a way that the hero, the man, is a vampire, and the woman, the heroine, which is done by Kristen Stewart in the name Bella Swan, is a normal human being. They fall in love with each other. The vampire and the woman, they fall in love with each other. So definitely someone should change. One has to change into the other form. If you look at the storyline, we can understand that it is the woman who is ultimately changing. The woman, Kristen Stewart, gets converted into a vampire just like her boyfriend, and then she joins her husband's family. This is how the story goes. It looks very confusing when you look at the fact that this was written by a female writer, and the female writer is talking about a woman changing after getting into the institution of marriage. So sometimes it happens because unconsciously we too start getting embedded into the platform of this patriarchal grace. Now, this is a dangerous effect of this kind of representation. So all said and done, we definitely will have to agree with the fact that feminism has actually gone a very long way, and feminism looks monstrously triumphant in today's world. But despite the explosion of all these theories and theoretical readings and discussions which have been going on, women are still completely marginalized in movies. Now, Martha Lawson of San Diego State University, after conducting a research on women representations in movies, says that this tendency today can be called as celluloid ceiling. This is the term that she uses, celluloid ceiling. Now, celluloid ceiling is in fact a metaphorical kind of description, which is actually an invisible barrier. It's just like a woman who is placed inside a glass cage. The woman feels that she can see the sky and she can soar high in the sky. But the moment she starts flying upwards, she gets stuck by the ceiling and she pitches down. And Martha Lawson says that this is exactly what happens with women on screen. It is just a superficial feeling that we are given that women are having enough representations. But in fact, no. Not. Because if you take a profound look, a deeper look, women are completely cornered and completely marginalized in all these movies, let it be in any industry. And I recently read another article which came in Telegraph, and Telegraph actually conducted an investigation in the year 2018. Now, this investigation was based on the male-female ratio of students studying in film institutions. And according to the research, the ratio of boys and girls in film institutions were just like 1:2, which means boys and girls, 1:2, which means the ratio of boys would be 1 and the ratio representing girls would be 2. Students studying in film institutions, which is an ample evidence for the fact that there are more girls studying in film institutions than boys. But the real problem comes when they move out of the film institutions and get into touch with the real film industry. When they come into this real film industry, there is a complete flipping that happens with the ratio. Women are not seen anywhere at all. We were talking about women's screen representations on screen. Now, let us think about off-screen representations. How many popular female directors have we got? How many popular female cinematographers have we got? How many female lyricists are there? Actually, just a few numbers, and sometimes nobody at all. Now, why is this happening? Now, this is happening because of the gender difference which works even within these industries. And sometimes we feel that the West is very popular, very progressive in many cases, but not exactly, because even in Hollywood, the same kind of situations are working. Hollywood is in no way an exception when it comes to these kind of gender bias. So what we require is a complete reformation, and this reformation has to come from the director as well as from the audience. Maybe there could be 1 or 2 movies in which females are coming in lead roles, but those movies are not coming into the mainstream movies, and sometimes times when they stand along with commercial blockbuster movies with male leads, they are not really getting enough attention. So what we need now is a complete reformation. Now, Molly Haskell in her work has already suggested in 1973 that what we need would be women's films. Now, Claire Johnston, another feminist, has suggested that we need counter cinema today. Laura Mulvey in her essay states that what we need is an alternate cinema. Now, women's films, counter cinema, or alternate cinema, all these are one and the same thing. It just means that movies which are totally different from the mainstream representations and movies which can give more importance and prominence for female characters. So ultimately, what we need is a complete unlearning of the systematic representations portrayed in movies, and a relearning has to come. Now, unless and until this unlearning and relearning happens, we cannot actually think about more women inclusions in movies. So, believing for a better future, believing that there could be some changes coming up, at least in the near future, where more female inclusions and women representations can happen in movies, I conclude my words. So thank you very much. Thanks a lot for your patient listening.
Thank you, ma'am. Now we have come to the end of this lively session. The platform is open for participants to post their questions or queries on the chat box.
Ms. Krishna, I'll just read out a few picked questions from the chat box. The first one is, how far do you think the issue of gender disparity is addressed in portraying contemporary reality of women?
Okay.
Gender disparity in addressing is addressed in portraying contemporary reality.
Okay, fine. A contemporary reality, when we talk about, first of all, thank you very much for the question. Now, when we talk about contemporary reality, women's lived experiences are actually standing in a very close correlation with man's experiences. Because in today's world, women have become a part of all the fields where men are there. And if you think about it with contemporary relevance, those kind of portrayals are not actually taken up in most of the movies. Because movies, as we have already discussed, still goes with the very same structural pattern, because it is very difficult to break a structural pattern. And that is what we have to do. Because either it has to come from the side of the director, who is a reformer, or at least when women-oriented movies are released, the society has to take it up. Unless these things happen, it is very difficult to talk about the realistic experiences that women are actually having in the contemporary world. Now, there is an essay regarding sexual objectification and women's lived experience, which was written by Fredrickson and Robertson. In this essay, they state that often in movie representations, they forget about the real life experiences of women happening. They try to portray women in the very same set pattern as an ideal wife, as an ideal mother, as an ideal homemaker. And these kind of real life lived experiences are often faded off when it comes along with the kind of previous conventional kind of representations. So even if you look at the present scenario, the lived experiences of women are never portrayed in movies.
Thank you, Ms. Krishna. The next question is, this is the role of Vidya Balan, which you were talking about. Multitasking is women's speciality. Can the image on Vidya Balan be explained as women handle personal and professional space with ease?
Okay, so that was a very interesting kind of suggestion, because this is what Freud does with the theories related with psychoanalysis, which Mulvey has stated in her essay. Now, women can be marginalized in two ways. This is what Mulvey says. Either you can completely subjugate her, or another easier option is glorification. So automatically, when you glorify her, with certain names like being the best mother, being the best homemaker, that in a way is an indirect way of subjugating women. That is how I would see it, because definitely multitasking and women, I don't know how far you can relate it with one specific gender and multitasking, because maybe there are different perspectives based on that, and usually there will be differences whether you are a man or a woman. These kind of differences can happen. So I don't know whether multitasking can be considered as a glorification of womanhood, because when you talk about multitasking, definitely balancing family life and professional life, if you use the term multitasking, in a way, indirectly, that is glorification of womanhood, which again is trusting her with the same responsibilities of the home. So, in a way, that is what Malvi stated in her essay, like she calls it as these kind of glorifications, which is again indirectly putting them into the same conventional roles.
Another question is, can you suggest a few journals where you can publish papers